Welcome back to Jewish Baseball More Than a Game podcast. Today, our guest is Zev Moore. He is 24 years old. He's a baseball player. He was born in central New Jersey, where he initially developed a love for baseball. He made Aliyah at the young age of 11 and shortly started competing with the Israel national team internationally, where he plays today with the senior national team. He was named the MVP of the U23 European Championship qualifier in Zurich, where he posted an impressive slash line of 500, 545, and 722, leading the tournament in several offensive categories. Following high school, he served in the Israeli Defense Forces as a sportai and elite athlete designation that allowed him to continue developing his baseball skills while fulfilling his military obligations. While there, he was recruited to several U.S. colleges and ended up choosing MIT, where he is currently a junior utility player. Zev has had success with summer collegiate baseball leagues in the past few years, and during his time with the West Hampton Aviators in the Hamptons Collegiate Baseball League, Moore made history by becoming the only player in league history to hit for the cycle, which is awesome. And he was the runner-up for MVP voting for the league last summer, leading the league in stolen bases and placing second in batting average. Moore's journey is marked by his dedication to both the sport and his religious belief. As an Orthodox Jew, he observes Shabbat and goes to great lengths to preserve that integral part of his identity. So Zev, thank you. And I also want to throw in myself that Zev recently has reached 100 hits in college, so that is insanely impressive. And thank you
Amazing.
for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, Zev, this is an honor. This is an honor. Can you kind of just take us back to the beginning as to where kind of, I guess from a baseball standpoint, where did your love of the game start?
Sure. So I come from an athletic family. My dad was very involved in swimming, recruit athlete to Princeton, and I just had that always in my environment growing up. And I actually grew up in a small town in central New Jersey, not very Jewish place. So after school, the thing I guess that we just kind of did was play baseball. I have two brothers, one actually my twin, and a brother 2 years younger than me. And I don't remember exactly where it started. Just growing up, we would play in the backyard. I started probably playing at 4 or 5 years old, and over time, it became difficult to play in organized leagues due to the issues with Shabbat. I wasn't able to travel to games. So my dad actually created a local league for Jewish players on Sundays that we played in. And I'm incredibly grateful to him for doing that. I don't think he expected it quite to become as serious as it was. And then once I moved to Israel, I was like, okay, we're moving out of the US. Unfortunately, it looks like baseball might be ending, but right before we moved there, my dad told us, look, he read some article about baseball in Israel, and shortly after, he went to go to tryouts for the Israel national team. And already at age 11 or 12, I was competing abroad in Italy for the Israel national teams. And the rest is history.
That's a crazy story. That's so cool. And, kind of bouncing off that, I think you're the first Orthodox Jewish baseball player we've had on the podcast. And you've kind of said how it not affected you, but kind of how it changed the game for you as a kid. Now that you're in college and MIT, can you kind of tell us how it's, changed the game at that level?
Yeah, no, it's very unique. I will say it's different. Part of that went into my choice of where I chose to go to college, whether that be how the scheduling looks for games, how accommodating my team will be, what my Jewish environment will look like in college. But on the day to day, it looks different for Saturdays. So I do play on Shabbat. It's permitted that there's nothing inherently um, problematic with playing on Saturdays, but it means not traveling, not using my phone. Food is a lot more of a challenge. I'm in those environments. So it means that I have to travel to where my team's going to play ahead of time. So I was supposed to do that this weekend in Southern Massachusetts for a big conference game. It actually got moved to Sunday. So that's kind of lucky, but it means staying at a hotel, and in this case, walking an hour to the field. When we played in New Jersey a few weeks ago, it meant walking about 2 hours to the field. And so I've been doing that independently and with my twin brother for several years, even with the national team. It's something I do and something I embraced as a part of my identity. And while it's unique, I think a lot of people respect that I go to these significant lengths and put my religion as a priority alongside my baseball, which is also incredibly important to me.
I think that's so important. Just, were there any players growing up that, you tried to like emulate and anyone from, I don't know, from the Yankees or the Mets or whoever, whichever team you grew up rooting for? Who's the player for you that you look at and you're like, man, I want to be just like that guy?
Yeah, so there weren't any necessarily big Jewish influences in my life. I was
Yeah,
always a big fan of Sandy Koufax and
yeah,
hearing the stories of him and some other old-time Jewish players. That was a big deal. Having more Jewish role models as baseball players more recently has been special to me, including playing with some of them. There are guys like Ryan Lavarnway that I watched growing up. I was able to meet as a little kid on the stands. And then in the past Euros, have an outfield assist to him that was like the game-saving run from the outfield. That was a pretty cool experience. But in terms of baseball influences, I'm a Yankees fan. I've always been a Yankee fan.
The good one. He's a good
Um,
one.
and yeah, so naturally, Derek Jeter as an infielder myself was always special. Over time, I think I broadened out my interests in terms of baseball players. Now I'm a little bit more of a general baseball fan, and I have favorite players from other teams, like Nolan Arenado, is a big one, just the way he plays the game.
That is so cool. And, as a Yankee fan myself, Derek Jeter, no better role model to have as a young kid who's an infielder. But, playing with the senior national team, playing for the U23 team, and, posting those impressive numbers. Can you tell us a game or a moment that stands out to you that you'll never, that you'll,
Sure. So with the under 18 national team in 2019, this was the first time that one of the youth national teams played in a qualifying tournament. So it works that there are qualifying tournaments for the big championship. So generally, the Israel teams weren't quite at the level to play in those, and it was more like club competitions, smaller competitions. We were competitive in, but this was kind of one of the first times, I believe the first time that IAB, the Israel Association of Baseball, was kind of like, okay, we have this good group of guys, we have this strong group of players. Let's see what they can do. And it was a pretty competitive qualifier. We had good teams that time, particularly Belgium. And then also the Swedish team was there and they were pretty strong. Great Britain was pretty strong. And I think we won the first two games pretty easily, but all the games were quite competitive. And then we lost a very close game against Belgium. And then there was some kind of tiebreaker in terms of who went to the championship game to win the pool, to advance to the actual European championships or the A pool. Basically, you have to win that B pool or that qualifier. So we lost on kind of like we blew the game. We must have been up 2 runs in the last inning. Actually, like made an error on a difficult play and felt pretty responsible for that. But we ended up very like by a very small margin winning, being one of the two teams in a tiebreaker to go up to the championship game. So we got this like renewed unexpected opportunity and we played Belgium like the next day in the championship game, and it was just a really special game. Again, back and forth, but we won. We ended up winning. I was the MVP of that tournament as well. So that was just a really cool experience. I remember emotions being really high, and that meant that the under 18 team basically went after that to European Championships and has stayed there since. So that was not just in terms of what we did, it kind of like left this legacy. And was kind of the same thing we did with hopefully with the under 23 team is now this year they're going to play in the European Championship and hopefully stay there. So that was significant both in the moment and then in terms of the consequences of it.
So I played, yeah, so I played a little bit of pro ball in Germany, and then I also played in Switzerland and in Zurich. And I don't know, I also love that field that they have in Zurich. It's really nice. Can you kind of talk about the difference between, you know, playing in front of an American crowd and then playing in front of a European crowd? Because there are differences. I just love to hear you all talk about them.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think within America and within the environment you're in, it really depends. So
Yeah.
summer ball is not going to have the same level of, for lack of better terms, animosity from fans that might be heckling at games. You probably won't see that as much in Europe. Then again, you have things around the game, like when we were in Zurich this past year, and that's not known to be a very anti-Semitic country. We
Yeah.
had people when we came to the field saying Free Palestine and such things. Someone took down the Israeli flag in the middle of the night at the field. So those are things you might experience more in a European context than an American one. I'd say baseball is kind of this special haven where you don't, or I don't really experience any of that. And it's more just respect and even admiration for what we're doing. It's funny. There's a team in our conference that liked my twin brothers Aton's walk-up song so much that that became his walk-up song. And yeah, that was their first time back at our field since last year. So they heard my Israeli walk-up song and they were really into that. So I thought that was a funny story.
What is the walk-up song so our listeners can download it?
Yeah, so that song really has gone kind of popular in Northeast baseball. Like quite a few people have heard about it through this. I will say it's called Duvshania. It's a Hebrew song. That is quite popular. Like it's been high on the charts, but it really works well as a walk-up song. I actually used it on my summer ball team when I wasn't with my brother, just because it's so good. I could make sure to send that to you after. So
Yes,
it
please.
gets people going.
You gotta definitely send us that after because I gotta add that to the playlist. I guess my next question is more tailored back to, your time in Israel and in the IDF. Can you just kind of explain to the listeners and to Miles and I, what exactly a sport tie is?
Yeah, sure. So it's a unique designation that allows you it's a hybrid program between the Army and kind of your respective national team that allows you to continue competing and developing in your sport while fulfilling that national service. So oftentimes it's a very minimal Army job. So in my case, it was a little bit more than that. So it was in operations and also a little bit of technical work, I will say. But it just meant that my schedule was centered around allowing me to train whenever necessary and even go abroad for competitions and training. So it's very helpful in that regard to allow you to play with the national team when necessary, and to also just be able to continue to train. Unfortunately, it's the reality in Israel that we need people to be in the army. And yeah, I'm grateful opportunity to have been able to do both things. For me, it wasn't a question of doing the army or not or such things. It was just, what does my army service look like? And I made the tough decision to kind of sacrifice a little bit in terms of what I was giving on the sheer army side of things, and try to kind of pay that forward with representing Israel, coaching youth baseball in the country, and community service, and then being the best soldier I could be.
Absolutely. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, it's well, I think one of the things that I'm really loving about just hearing you talk right now is just like you're very passionate about the community, you're very passionate about Israel and Team Israel baseball. Can you kind of go into detail as to why this means so much to you? Because clearly this is something that it gives you like a sense of meaning and a reason to wake up and brings you so much joy. Can you kind of tell us like, what kind of joy this brings you?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, and it's very much the case. Like I'm extremely passionate about baseball and also other components of my life. My religion, I'm very active in the pro-Israel advocacy on campus, and that's been very important for me to give back and do what I can to support Israel here abroad. But I think all of these things are kind of intertwined for me. So I see a lot of parallels and a lot of lessons I learned from baseball that I could translate into my life, whether that's constant improvement. I'm in my growth mindset and constant introspection and trying to understand where I am in terms of my skills. In baseball, I try to be this dynamic player that has like I'm able to check off the boxes with all of my tools, my speed, with my ability to hit and help the team in many different ways. And I think that comes from just making sure my tools are there, making sure that my strength is there, making sure I'm practicing both the infield and outfield, working on different components of hitting and all the intricacies that go into that. And I think that that's very tied into my religion and the way I live my life. And if that means sacrificing that goes into that. So waking up early before prayers to make sure that I'm studying religious texts and trying to all fit that in together works in tandem very well for me. It does get busy, especially with school. That's another big priority of mine. I don't feel that it takes away from my baseball experience, but just keeps me very focused and it is busy at times. But coming into MIT, I told myself that it'll be busier during the school year, but I'll be very focused and making sure that I'm fulfilling all of my commitments to the highest degree. And then, particularly in the summers, I'm going to focus that around baseball a little bit more and playing at the highest level I can.
Absolutely. So can you kind of walk us through a day in your life in the summer training since you do have that time, like what it may look like for you?
Yeah, so it does depend on which summer, obviously. And I will say I really like the summer I just had, both on the field and off the field. It was very successful for me. So then, for example, in the summer, it's nice because it's more easy for me to prioritize sleep. I do my best at school, but just the nature of it makes things difficult. But I do understand that it's extremely important. But first off, this summer, I can wake up a little bit later, start my day, go to prayers, probably like 8 a.m. And then I was doing this remote internship in finance. So that was super interesting for me. we'll do that for a few hours, go lift, and then we had games basically every day. I love the feeling of just playing every day, getting into the groove, and then come back. Maybe go also to additional like later prayers in the day, studying some religious texts, a little bit more work, and then really just staying on top of my meals, mobility, journaling at night, and then making sure I get to sleep at a reasonable hour. So it's just kind of centered around all those things, trying to minimize distractions. I can tell you, I was in the Hamptons actually for 2 summers. This is a bit sad to say, but I probably went to the beach maybe a total of like 4 times. So I was just very focused on what I was there for and the things that are really integral in my days. We had almost no days off. So yeah, but I enjoy it.
Absolutely, who wouldn't? I mean, you get to play baseball every day. You're in the Hamptons in the summer. I mean, what else can you really need?
Yeah. I'm very grateful. I'm very lucky. And yeah, I think then it got to a point where late in the summer I said, where can I go? But it's a bit of a shorter league. Where can I go after my league ends that might provide me with an additional baseball experience? Some teams actually reached out to me. I reached out to some other teams independently and ended up being able to play last summer for a few weeks in the NECBL, which honestly was a very special experience, especially as a D3 player. I came across one other D3 hitter in my entire time there. So there were guys that came up to me during games here that said they like during my college games said, "Oh, I was a pitcher, didn't really get a chance to pitch while I was there, but I recognized you because I was like someone from MIT hitting in the middle of the order for an NECBL team." So I thought was pretty cool and had some success there before kind of leaving a little bit early to play with a national team in Switzerland.
Yeah, so Zev, you're a baller, right? I'll say it. You're a baller. You know your resume speaks for itself, and it's just so cool hearing all of this. Do you have any like pro ball aspirations?
Yeah, it's a great question. Growing up, it was always my number one goal, and it's something I've thought a lot about. I'd like to play baseball at the highest level I can in the coming years. A lot of other goals for later in my life. It's something I definitely have to figure out how that looks like in my life now. I came into MIT. There are people that think came into MIT and chose it over bigger schools in terms of baseball that I had, bigger alternatives. And certain people you've had on this podcast actually, interestingly, gave me a lot of advice in this whole decision process I had, which ultimately led to me choosing MIT. People thought I came into MIT and that meant I'm just prioritizing my academics and baseball is like a secondary thing and just kind of this hobby I'm going to have on the side. It's not the case at all. There's a big part of me chose MIT because of the baseball, because of the value, the expected value of being able to play on day one. I was a leadoff hitter playing shortstop my first day in college. Not so many people can say that, especially at a bigger school, and a lot of value was created from that. So it's still a priority in my life. I really want to play baseball at the highest level I can. So definitely there are those aspirations. And I think a big part of what I'm focused on is being able to play with Team Israel at the highest level and represent my country and kind of support that team as much as possible as well in the coming years.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you said a huge thing, which, I think gets missed unfortunately a lot today is, you got to play day one. And I think a lot of kids now would rather go to a big name school and ride the bench for a year or not get on the field for maybe even two. And I think, what you're saying is, getting there day one, starting, developing as a player at the college level is something that is just so rare. And I think that's so cool that you made that decision, partly because of that. And I think, that leads into my next question is for the youth out there, especially the Jewish youth, what is your message to them, especially now with the climate, here in the States? Some are, afraid of being Jewish. What is your message to them?
Yeah. So I would first say it's just the point you made. I would kind of expound on that. Going in, I was really unsure about this. If you want to try to go to pro ball, there's so few from Division 3, all these things. But there was someone from MIT a few years ago, a hitter who was drafted in the 8th round, and it's very possible. And I would say, like you said, like really, I can't emphasize that point enough, and I can't say emphasize how much I appreciate that advice from some of my coaches with the national team and other people I spoke with that kind of gave me this advice of just the importance of looking at the whole picture, and not just doing what's more flashy and what would be the cooler commitment post and the amazing gear you would get at some of these big schools. At the end of the day, that's not really important. So yeah, I appreciate you kind of expounding on that point. What I would say to the youth is just that you can do it. When I was a kid growing up through the national team program, there were almost no Israelis in college. There was Alon Leishman, and he was a big deal. But now there are people like Asaf Loengard, who's now playing pro ball as an Israeli that grew up in Israel. And probably about a dozen, they say, Israeli college baseball players, which is just huge change from even 2, 3 years ago. Guys who have been successful at the next level and people with pro ball aspirations and kind of that ability potentially to play at some of these top levels. So if you want it, you can definitely do it. And it looks very different in different shapes and forms, whether that be JUCO or high academics like myself and my twin brother. But I highly recommend, like, if you're committed to it, you can do it. Just be very on top of your process. Like, it doesn't just happen from your motivation, but the discipline and process and sticking to that is what's important at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. That's, it's just so cool seeing everything expand and just getting to know you all and just, you have such a good head on your shoulders. And for me, I don't really have a question, but it's more of just like a thank you for sharing your story and, giving us perspective on everything that you've done to this point. I think it's so I'm someone who always believes in, contributing to the development of the youth and contributing to communities that help shape us for who we are. Very proud and very Jewish. So for me, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to share my story. And hopefully I can inspire if it's one person. I know I've been able to speak something that's very special to me is just being able to speak to certain youth that are interested in this path and they reach out to me and kind of want to see what that's like. It's still not a path that so many have taken. So hopefully I could provide an inspiration, whether that be to Orthodox Jews or Israeli Jews. At the end of the day, the vast majority of my development was in Israel with Israel baseball. So I consider myself first and foremost Israeli for American. So I'm happy if I can inspire anyone to kind of follow in this path or follow their dreams.
Absolutely. And I think you're also showing that it can be done on the religious side too. Because, a lot of people, oh, college baseball is so busy, so hectic, which it is, but if you prioritize everything, if you really make the time, you can achieve not only baseball, greatness and playing on the field, but you could also achieve your religion as well and being the best person you can be, which, you have clearly done. And to Miles's point, just thank you so much for sharing everything that you've been through, sharing your story. And I think our listeners are going to be delighted to hear everything.
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me. I really appreciate what you guys are doing as well. It's really seems like a great cause. And yeah, thank you so much.
Of course. And, we'd love to have you back on, maybe before the Euros, just to kind of give us a little update. We're going to be following you throughout your college, the end of your college season this year, and
Sure.
wherever you play summer this year. So it'd be great to have you back.
Thank you.
Yep, of course.